The greatest form of freedom in a world full of masks, noise, and expectations is to allow yourself to be happy, without justification, without hiding, simply as you are. This is not an audiobook full of advice or recipes for a perfect life. It is an invitation, a silent reminder that you don't have to become someone else to feel good. You don't have to wait until everything fits. Not until you're perfect. Not until others understand you. In a world that constantly pushes you to function better, it is a radical act to simply say, I want to be happy, without permission. In the next chapters, you won't find quick fixes, but thoughts that bring you back to yourself, to your truth, to your inner peace. Because you need no conditions, no ifs, no buts. You only need yourself. And the decision to begin today. Chapter 1. Happiness isn't where you've been searching. We all grow up with images of what happiness should look like. It starts early, perhaps with the sentence, if you work hard, you will be happy one day. Or with the idea that happiness is something you must earn. In school, through good grades. Later, through achievement, career, a relationship, property, status. We learn that happiness is a goal, something that waits for us at the end of a long road if we do everything right. So we run, without really knowing where. We collect diplomas, commitments, titles, tasks. We meet expectations, wear masks, optimize ourselves. And as we hurry on, a quiet dissatisfaction grows within us. We feel that something is wrong, that the promised happiness never really arrives. Sometimes we pause briefly, perhaps after a professional success, after buying a new car, or at the end of a long, fully planned vacation. And for a moment it feels like happiness. But as soon as that moment passes, the emptiness returns, like an echo that softly whispers, that wasn't it. That is the moment many begin to doubt, not themselves, but life. Yet the truth isn't that life has deceived us. The truth is that we searched for something that was never really where we expected it. We believed happiness was a reward for conformity, for discipline, for functioning. But happiness is not a prize. Happiness is a state, an inner yes. Something that arises when you stop being something you never were. True happiness doesn't begin when you have more. It begins when you need less. When you stop forcing your life into to-do lists. When you start listening to your own rhythm, living your own colors, respecting your own limits. Happiness doesn't come from outside. It resides where you are honest with yourself, where you no longer try to be someone just to be loved or recognized. Many fear this truth because it forces you to look inward, and inside isn't always comfortable. There are old wounds, forgotten desires, unlived dreams. There is the voice of the child in you who once believed in miracles, and whom you silenced when you thought you had to be adult, strong, functional. But happiness doesn't need functioning. Happiness needs connection, and that begins with you. There is a moment in life that changes everything. It is not a dramatic instant, no external upheaval. It is a quiet understanding, an inner nod. You wake up, perhaps one morning, perhaps in the middle of a conversation, perhaps in a totally ordinary moment, and suddenly you feel, I am tired of being someone I'm not. And right there begins the path back. Not back into the past, but back to yourself. That doesn't mean you must give up everything. Not that you need to completely overhaul your life. It means you begin to choose more consciously. That you examine what of what you do truly belongs to you, and what you only do to please, to suffice, to avoid standing out. It means you lovingly remove your masks, not because you want to prove something to others, but because you want to meet yourself again. Perhaps this is the hardest part, meeting yourself again, without distractions, without excuses, without the old stories you've told yourself repeatedly so you wouldn't have to feel how much something was missing. But precisely in that lies the beginning of happiness, in the willingness to be honest. Not perfect, not strong, just honest. Some people take years to reach this point. Others are led there by crises, losses, or breakdowns. And yes, it hurts to realize you've been running in the wrong direction for so long, that you confused love with dependency, success with recognition, security with control. But that pain is not an enemy. It is a compass. And if you listen, it shows you what you truly need. What do you really need to be happy? Not the answer you were taught, the real one. Perhaps it's less noise, more nature, more silence. Perhaps it's less struggle, more gentleness. Perhaps it's to feel yourself again, in your body, in your boundaries, in your longing. You will not arrive in one day. There is no point where you can say, "Now I am forever happy." Happiness is not a state that stays. It is a flow, a pulse, a spark in the everyday. Sometimes it is a sunbeam on your face. Sometimes a conversation that touches you. Sometimes it is simply the awareness, I may breathe today, I may be, and that is enough. In truth, happiness was never far away. It was just covered by noise, by expectations, by too much having to do and too little being. You don't have to become more. You may be again. When you understand that, something new begins. Not another life, but a different view of your life. You begin to see beauty where before there was only function. You begin to feel moments instead of planning them. You begin to take yourself seriously again, not in importance but in dignity, because it is dignified to be happy, not loud, not perfect, simply genuine. Genuine in pain, genuine in joy, genuine in between. Happiness doesn't mean everything is easy. It means you are willing to feel life and not lose yourself in the process. Perhaps you have been searching for years. Perhaps you hoped that somewhere out there was a place, a person, a state that would finally make you whole. And perhaps you now realize that you are that place. That what you are looking for does not lie in a destination, but in your decision to embrace this moment. Happiness was never where you were searching, because it has been inside you all along. Chapter 2. The Myth of Conditional Happiness. I will be happy when. So begins one of the most dangerous sentences one tells oneself over and over. It sounds harmless, almost hopeful, like a promise to oneself. Yet in truth, it is a cage, an invisible shackle that keeps postponing happiness, there, where it doesn't hurt, but where it never truly lives. Many people live life on standby. They delay their joy until later, until the moment when finally everything fits, when they have lost weight, when they are promoted, when the right partner arrives, when they have enough money, when they have moved, when the children are grown, when they have more time. It is an endless wait for perfect conditions that almost never occur. And even when they do occur, happiness never lasts. It flickers briefly, like a candle in the wind, and goes out again. Because those who tie happiness to conditions never learn to keep it. They chase it. They make it dependent. And what is dependent causes fear. Fear of losing it. Fear of not deserving it. Fear of not being able to control it. This myth of conditional happiness is deeply ingrained in our society. It starts in childhood. If you behave, you'll get a reward. Later it becomes, if you are successful, you will be happy. If you start a family, you've arrived. And the tragic thing is, many follow this pattern their entire lives, only to realize one day that although they achieved everything they were promised, the feeling of fulfillment never came. Because they never learned to feel happiness in the now. in imperfection, in incompleteness, in the chaos that life often is. Instead, they learn to strive, to control, to function, all in the hope that one day they would arrive at a place that doesn't really exist. For happiness is not a place. It is not a state you reach and then never leave. It is a feeling, an attitude, a yes to the moment, even if it is not ideal, even if something is missing, even if life hasn't served you what you ordered. Happiness does not live in the fulfillment of all wishes. It lives in peace with what is. Many confuse happiness with euphoria, with the high when something unexpected happens, with the rush of the new, with the temporary distraction from inner tensions. But true happiness is quieter. It is no fireworks but a campfire. It does not burn brightly, but it warms. It does not flare up, but it remains. Those who follow the myth of conditional happiness live always in expectation. And expectations are deceptive. They make us blind to what is already there. They filter reality through a grid of not enough. You could see a beautiful sunrise, but if you think you may only be happy when your bank account is right, you won't enjoy it. You will be mentally elsewhere, in lack, in the future, in the not yet. And that is precisely what robs you of what you are actually waiting for. The feeling of abundance, of connection, of lightness. All of these are only possible when you are present, when you are not waiting for something, but begin to appreciate what is already there. That does not mean you must abandon goals. On the contrary, goals give direction. They motivate, inspire, structure. But the problem arises when you make your joy dependent on whether you reach them. When you forbid yourself to feel good now, simply because the goal isn't there yet. Happiness is not a reward. It is not a result. It is a state that grows when you stop tying it to conditions. Perhaps you learned that happiness must be earned, that you have to work hard for it, that you must first give, achieve, sacrifice, to then maybe, someday, have the right to joy. But that is an inheritance, not a law, and you are free to give it back. You may stop believing you must prove yourself to exhaustion to experience ease. You may start today, even if everything isn't perfect yet, even if you have unfinished business, even if you're doubting, searching, struggling, you may still be happy. Perhaps not wholly, perhaps not always, but a little bit. And that little bit can become the beginning of a new attitude, an attitude that says, I am not waiting any longer. I'm not waiting for others to love me. I'm not waiting for things to get easier. I'm not waiting to be better, prettier, smarter, more stable. I allow myself now to take a moment to breathe, to smile, to feel alive, without condition, without guilt, without permission. Because happiness is no contract. It's no if-then. It is a nevertheless. A because I allow myself. An inner home that has been waiting for you all along. And perhaps you begin right now to write a new sentence. One that doesn't start with, I will be happy when, but with, I decide today to feel a small moment of happiness, simply because I can. And that is enough, for now, for today, for the beginning. Chapter 3. The Guilt of Being Happy and How to Release It. There is a form of inner heaviness that is hard to explain. It appears precisely the moment you begin to feel better. When you first breathe deeply again after a long time, laugh, let yourself be well, and suddenly something inside you tightens. A suspicion, a discomfort, a delicate but piercing stir, almost like a voice whispering, are you even allowed to feel this? This voice has no name, but it lives in many people. It is the quiet guilt of being happy. Not the grand, dramatic guilt, but that invisible, learned form of inner resistance to your own well-being. As if happiness were something you must secretly take, something you must justify or earn, something you are not simply allowed to feel. This guilt is not innate. It is learned. It comes from your parents' looks when they forgot themselves so you could grow. It lives in the sentences of those around you when you shared your dreams and were told life is no concert of wishes. It dwells in the unspoken rules of your background, where sacrifice often counted more than joy. Many carry a deep loyalty to the pain they come from, and that loyalty is subtle. It shows in holding back, though you could go forward, in making yourself small, though you want to grow, in staying in relationships, in roles, in jobs, not because you love it, but because you don't want to be too much, not too bright, not too free, not too far from what you learned as normal. Happiness then becomes a risk, something that could mean separation from your roots, from old bonds, from familiar dynamics. Those who grew up where life was hard, where one had to fight to survive, where dreams were laughed at, often unconsciously carry the belief that lightness is betrayal. And so one lives in an inner conflict. One part strives for fulfillment, freedom, peace, and another part pulls back, breaks, sabotages. Not out of malice, but out of loyalty. Because you learned that belonging is more important than happiness. Because you believe you would drift away if you shone too brightly. But that is an illusion. It is an old defense mechanism that may once have been useful, but today prevents you from fully unfolding. The truth is, your happiness takes nothing away from anyone. It doesn't diminish the suffering of others. It is not an attack, not an insult, not arrogance. Your happiness is a gift, even for those who love you. Because only when you allow yourself to live well do you send the message, it is possible, for you too. But to understand that, you must take a deep inward step. You must release the guilt. The guilt of showing yourself. The guilt of feeling good. The guilt of no longer fighting. And you need no applause, no permission, and no perfect moment for that. You only need your decision to tell a different story. Instead of, I mustn't be happier than my parents, it can become, I honor their story by healing mine. Instead of, I should remain humble. It may read, I may grow without losing myself. Instead of, if I feel good, I'm selfish. It may become, if I feel good, I can give more to others. These inner phrases change not only your thoughts but your nervous system. For guilt isn't just an idea. It sits in the body, in your posture, in your voice, in your breathing. You recognize it in how you apologize when you laugh, how you explain yourself when you're proud, how you shrink when you really need space. Therefore, letting go of guilt doesn't begin in the head. It begins in practice, in small steps, by allowing yourself to feel good without immediately thinking of all those who are worse off, by welcoming joy without qualifying it, by feeling gratitude without feeling guilty that others suffer. That doesn't mean you become blind to reality. It means you stop punishing yourself with it. You can be compassionate and happy. You can be mindful and free. You may empathize without co-suffering. You may give without giving yourself away. And eventually, you will notice something in you relax. How the knot that held you back for years slowly unties. How you begin to take life more lightly, not superficially, but gently. How you no longer find yourself suspicious when you feel joy. Then there is no guilt, only a quiet knowing. I owe no one anything by being happy, but I owe myself everything if I don't allow it. And precisely at that point, something new begins, something that need not be loud. It is enough that it is real. Chapter 4. Happiness is not euphoria, but peace. When people speak of happiness, they often mean something dazzling, something big, loud, moving. They think of ecstatic moments, of highs, of that overwhelming feeling that takes your breath away, laughs that come from the gut, hearts overflowing with joy, dreams coming true and embracing everything you ever hoped for. But that is not what everyday happiness means. Not the happiness that stays. Not what carries you when life turns its curves. Because that kind of happiness, euphoric, bright, ecstatic, is fleeting. It can be beautiful. It can remind you what is possible. But it is not a home. It is a sparkle, not a foundation. Real happiness, rooted deeply within you, feels different. It is quieter, softer. It does not shout. It whispers. It does not impose. It waits in the background. It is like a calm room inside you that you can return to any time, even when a storm rages outside. This happiness is not an explosion but a glow. Not fireworks, but a hearth fire. It does not dance at the peak. It sustains you through the everyday. We live in an age geared towards overstimulation. Everything must be more intense, faster, more exciting. Even our happiness is marketed like a product. Experience the best of your life. Higher, further, more. But what remains when the noise has faded? When you are alone with yourself, without new impulses, without external confirmation? If happiness only exists when you're on a high, you will spend your life on a marathon, always chasing the next kick. And in doing so, you will overlook what awaits you in the quieter spaces between, the peace that settles when you no longer have to prove yourself, the joy of the ordinary, the gentleness of the now. This happiness is not glamorous. It has no perfect light. It's not Instagrammable. It resides in a hot cup of tea when you're tired, in a gentle smile you give yourself, in an evening when you have nothing to accomplish, in a conversation that isn't spectacular but honest. It is the happiness of the soul, not the stage. To get there, you must unlearn. You must recalibrate your body, your nervous system, your emotions. Because if you have been trained for years only on tension, performance, stimulus, and success, you often don't recognize peace as happiness, but as boredom. And so many flee precisely when calmness arrives. They cannot endure it because they never learned that silence nourishes, that slowness heals, that doing nothing is also being. A person who feels safe in their stillness is a person who has arrived with themselves. They need no constant external validation. They do not need distraction to bear themselves. They need no steady stream of experiences because they have learned that their inner life is rich enough to dwell in. This form of happiness is not spectacular, but it is real, and it is enduring. You recognize it by not needing to hurry, by not doubting yourself when there are no highlights, by not falling into a hole when the euphoria fades. Instead, you start to see everyday life as something valuable, not a stretch between two peaks, but a stage for quiet miracles. Perhaps that means walking more slowly, not because you have to, but because you want to. Perhaps it means doing less, but more mindfully, not planning everything, but feeling again, breathing in, looking, not scrolling in every free minute, but letting thoughts flow. Perhaps right there lies happiness, in the imperfect present you finally inhabit with your whole being. A person who learns to find peace within changes their relationships too. They no longer seek the one person who will make them happy. They seek connection, depth, authenticity, not drama, but reliability. They no longer have to fight to be loved, because they have stopped fighting themselves. This quiet form of happiness demands courage. Not the courage to do something big, but the courage to simply be, without a mask, without a constant smile, without the pressure to be enough. It is the courage to become soft where you hardened yourself for years. The courage to rest where you always drove yourself. The courage to discover yourself as home, not a construction site but a place of belonging. And in that lies the beauty. You don't have to achieve anything to feel this happiness. You don't have to perform. You don't even have to be in an exceptionally good mood. You only have to stop treating yourself as a project. You may begin to accompany yourself, kindly, patiently, openly. Happiness then ceases to be a goal and becomes an attitude, not a state that depends on something, but an inner foundation you can walk on, even if the ground outside trembles. And the best part? The more you cultivate this quiet happiness within, the less dependent you become on the outside, on success, applause, validation, consumption. You need less, yet feel more. You demand less, yet give more. You hurry less, yet go further. Because you have finally arrived with yourself. And there, happiness was there all along. Chapter 5. Happiness begins in the body. Happiness is not a purely mental state, nor is it merely a mood. Happiness is something that flows through your body, or is blocked there. Any attempt to be happy without involving your body remains a theoretical construct, an idea in the head, detached from the place where your life actually takes place, within you, in your skin, in your muscles, in your breath. We have been conditioned to ignore the body, especially when it comes to emotional matters. We speak of thoughts, beliefs, goals, but hardly of sensations, hardly of what the body remembers, even when the mind has long forgotten. Yet the body carries everything. It stores experiences, tensions, fears, and also joy, security, comfort. Most people live separate from their bodies. They function. They move because they must, to work, to exercise, through the day, but they don't truly feel it. They don't notice it until it hurts, or fails, or rebels. Yet the body doesn't wait for attention. It reacts to neglect, and eventually it expresses what you no longer want to hear. When you begin to reconnect with your body, your relationship to happiness changes fundamentally. Because happiness needs a home. It needs a physical place to land, a system that can receive it. And this place is your nervous system. If it's overloaded, constantly in survival mode, it cannot hold joy. It will immediately transform it into tension, or fear, distrust, hypervigilance. A relaxed body is an open gate to happiness, not explosive, bright happiness, but deep, nurturing, calm. This happiness does not depend on what is happening outside, but on how present you are within yourself. And presence is not in the head. It is in the breath, in the heartbeat, in the way you walk, eat, touch, and are touched. It is no coincidence that people under a lot of stress often say, "I can't feel joy anymore." Because joy is not a mental act. It is a bodily resonance. It arises in depth when the body feels safe, when it doesn't have to defend itself, when it may breathe instead of tensing, when it may let go instead of holding on. That is why caring well for your body is no luxury. It is the foundation for feeling alive. And this care doesn't begin with diets, programs, or discipline. It begins with mindfulness, with small gestures of attention, with consciously feeling your own limits, with the decision not to work against yourself, but with yourself. A person in tune with their body lives differently. They notice sooner when they are overwhelmed. They sense when their energy dips. They stop overriding themselves. And precisely that is the point. Happiness grows where you no longer override yourself, where you take yourself seriously, where you listen to the subtle signals before they have to shout. An often underestimated key on this path is sleep. Not quantity, but quality. A rested body processes better, reacts more gently, carries less overstimulation. Sleep is healing. It is integration. And yet it is often treated as secondary, as something you allow yourself only once everything else is done. But how do you expect to feel happiness if your system is permanently submerged in exhaustion? Movement, too, plays an essential role, not as an obligation, but as expression. Your body was made to move, not only to burn calories, but to process emotions. Feelings that become lodged in the body often find their exit through movement. Walks, dancing, yoga, conscious breathing work, all are forms of communication with your inner self. And each time you move without pressure, without goal, but with curiosity and love, you signal to your system, I am here, I care. And then there is something almost forgotten in our culture, touch. The human body needs it, not only in romantic relationships, but as a basic need. A loving hug, a mindful hand on your shoulder, a deliberate stroking of your own arms. All are bodily messages of safety, of belonging, of comfort, and yes, of happiness too. Another quiet path to bodily happiness is eating. Not as consolation, not as control, but as ritual, as connection to yourself. What you eat, how you eat, with whom you eat. All of this is part of your inner climate. Quickly gobbled meals between appointments or in front of screens leave traces, just like dining in calmness, in gratitude, in connection. It isn't the dish that decides whether it does you good, but the energy with which you receive it. When you allow your body to be your home again, something begins to shift. You feel yourself again. You become soft where you were hard. You become permeable where you were blocked. And suddenly you notice, happiness is not just a thought. It is a state you can feel in every cell. And that is what it's about. No longer talking about happiness, but feeling it within you. Now, without condition, without staging, without grand words. Because happiness doesn't begin tomorrow. It doesn't begin when you've changed enough. It begins in your body, there where your breath flows, there where your heart beats, there where you welcome yourself again. Chapter 6. Letting go of the role, embracing the truth. There is a silence that only becomes audible when the noise of the mask stops, when the effort to be something finally gives up, when you pause, not because you have to, but because you can't help it. Then what has always been there reveals itself, your truth. Many people don't live their lives. They play a role. They perform a character they've perfected over years, a version of themselves that society accepts, that meets expectations, that functions well. This role often served its purpose. It protected you, secured belonging, created order in a chaotic inner world. But it also came at a cost. Energy, aliveness, authenticity. You don't become the actor in your own life overnight. It starts subtly, perhaps with a half-hearted smile. I'm fine. That isn't true. A small compromise that feels harmless but cuts deep. Over time, you become a figure shaped by society, expected by family, nourished by the fear of being different. That figure may win applause for its strength, its control, its adaptability. But no one sees the price you pay to never truly be yourself. The constant adjusting of your voice, behavior, opinions, the self-censorship, the quiet feeling that you're never all there, because a part of you is always held back. The longer you play that role, the heavier it becomes. Not because it changes, but because you do. Your inner world grows while the external image remains static. And that conflict begins to ache. Not loudly, but persistently, like a stone in your shoe you can no longer ignore. At some point you realize you no longer recognize yourself in what you're doing. You keep functioning, but you don't feel yourself. You react, but you don't feel. You speak, but your words are hollow. And then you know, you can't carry this mask any longer without breaking. That is the moment many flee deeper into their role, or begin to peel it away, layer by layer. Not in one grand liberation, but in small, honest steps. A sentence that sounds different. A truth no longer swallowed. A boundary set, not against others, but for yourself. Letting go of your old self-image is not pleasant. It is a kind of inner death. The end of illusions, of stories you've grown used to even though they've kept you captive. You won't immediately know who you really are, only who you're not anymore, and that is enough for now. It takes courage to hold that emptiness. Between the old and the new lies an in-between phase that feels disoriented, sometimes lonely. You are questioned, not only by others, but from within. Who are you if you're not the strong one, the funny one, the reliable one? Who are you without your old roles? You simply are, and that is enough. Your truth needn't be loud or rebellious or provocative. It only needs to be real, and it may be vulnerable, contradictory, raw. And that is its beauty. Truth has depth. It sustains. It heals. It draws people who love you not for your mask, but for your presence, your radiance born of honesty, not perfection. A person standing in their truth has nothing left to prove. They needn't justify themselves, convince, adapt. Their words are clear because they spring from silence. Their gaze is soft because they no longer fight. Their choices may not always be comfortable, but they are authentic. Happiness arises not from success, but from integrity, from alignment of inner and outer. When what you feel matches what you do, when you can look in the mirror without turning away, when your laughter comes from deep within, not because you have to, but because you want to. Truth doesn't demand perfection. It demands presence, being here with all that you are. Sometimes that means admitting mistakes, showing weakness, accepting help. It means no longer fleeing your story, but embracing it as part of your path, no longer as definition, but as the foundation for your growth. The more you shed your role, the lighter your life becomes. Not because circumstances get easier, but because you no longer work against yourself. You need less energy to function. You need no strategies to hide. You breathe more deeply. You sleep more soundly. You simply exist. And suddenly there is space for depth, for newness, for people who need you not as a role, but as a human. For decisions born of clarity, not fear. For days when you live rather than perform. This happiness is unspectacular, but it is real. It grows not from applause, but from agreement with yourself. You were never what you had to play, and now it's time to remember who you are underneath. Chapter 7. The noise that separates you from yourself. It is not the chaos outside that destroys us, but the constant noise that prevents us from hearing ourselves. We live in an age where silence is almost suspicious, where every free moment is filled with voices, images, opinions, notifications. Even our breathing space is subtitled. Our silence is voiced. Everything is loud. Everything demands attention. Eventually, you grow accustomed to the hum in the background, to the rush, the multitasking, the perpetual availability. You wake up to a screen and fall asleep to another. You scroll more than you breathe. You consume more of others' thoughts than you finish your own. You take in what you cannot digest. And in that overload, you lose something precious. Contact with yourself. Not dramatically. You still function. You work, you laugh, you plan. But inside, you've gone numb. Not in the sense of feeling nothing, but of being overstimulated. Your nervous system, your thoughts, your emotions are on constant receive, yet nothing really lands. You know what is happening in the world, but not what is happening within you. This bombardment exacts a high price. It makes you restless, even when you're doing nothing. It drives you to seek entertainment, even when you're tired. It pushes you to fill every silence so you don't have to feel. Because silence confronts, asks no questions but allows no excuses. And that is precisely its gift. The path back to yourself always goes through the noise, not by fighting it, but by stepping aside, by consciously creating spaces where nothing has to happen, where you needn't react, like, or reply, where you relearn to feel yourself, not by doing, but by simply being. Such spaces are rare today and almost require courage to enter. They feel empty, even eerie at first, sitting on the couch without your phone, and suddenly you feel your heart beating, walking without music, and your thoughts begin to flow, unfiltered, raw, maybe painful. But there healing begins, where you become receptive again to what lives in you. Happiness is presence. Presence is possible only in silence. Not absolute quiet, but inner clarity. A state where you stop covering yourself up and start taking your emotions seriously. Not analyzing, not judging, just allowing. And that requires time. Not much, but consistently. Silence isn't absence of sound. It's a state. A space where you stop scattering yourself, where your thoughts cease warring against you and settle. Not instantly, not on command, but with practice, patience, willingness. You don't have to become an ascetic. You needn't retreat to the mountains to find yourself. But you may create rituals. 5 minutes in the morning of doing nothing, 10 minutes at night of just breathing, 1 offline day per month, a walk without destination, a meal in silence. These small islands change your entire inner climate. They make you sensitive to nuances, to subtleties, to needs that otherwise drown in noise. And over time you notice, you require fewer stimuli because you feel more, fewer distractions because you no longer fear yourself. For the real reason we avoid silence is that in it we meet ourselves, not the image we show, but what lies beneath, our vulnerability, open questions, true state. If you can hold that without immediately fleeing outside, something wonderful happens. You become whole again. A person who can hold themselves needn't numb. They need not please, impress, or keep up. They live more deeply, more truly, more slowly, but with greater meaning. Modern humans have forgotten how to listen, not just outward but inward. They don't hear how tired they are, how much sadness lives in them, how deep their longing, how rich their wisdom. All that remains silent as long as noise reigns. But once you start to quiet down, magic happens. Your intuition returns, your body relaxes, your decisions become clearer. You need less and feel more. You learn again to distinguish what truly comes from you and what is mere echo. To become still in a loud world is a radical act, but it leads you home, to the place where you no longer have to function or perform, where you simply are. And there, at the center of your being, happiness awaits. Quiet, patient, warm, and true. Chapter 8. The Beauty of Not Always Being Okay. There are days when everything feels heavy. Thoughts are gray, your heart is burdened, your body feels foreign. Nothing is particularly wrong, yet everything is a struggle. These days creep in unannounced, without obvious reason, and the first thing many do is judge themselves. We believe we must pull ourselves together, keep functioning, think positively, pretend nothing is wrong. In a society that equates strength with consistency, any pause, any tear, any fragility is seen as weakness, though often that very feeling is a sign of deepest aliveness. Not being okay doesn't mean you're broken. It means you feel, and feeling is not a system error, but the system itself. What you suppress remains within you. It doesn't disappear but shapes you quietly from inside. What you allow can transform. Acknowledged pain loses its grip. Expressed sadness softens. Honored fatigue becomes an invitation to slow down. The compulsion to be perpetually upbeat is like a tight garment that suffocates you, a mask that grows heavier each day you hide behind it. Eventually, you lose yourself in that forced smile. You smile for others, while your inside is silent. You say, "I'm fine," though you feel empty, and you send yourself the message, "How I really am is not enough." But that's the lie. You don't have to shine every day to be lovable. You don't have to be motivated, clear-headed, or strong every morning to be valuable. Your humanity isn't contingent on performance or mood. It is inviolable, sacred, even, and especially in your tender moments. A person who allows themselves not to be okay touches something real within. They are no longer fleeing from their inner life, but embracing themselves as a whole organism of light and shadow. And this acceptance is not surrender. It is a deep inner yes to life in all its fullness. There is a beauty in pain visible only when you no longer reject it. A dignity in sadness that appears only when you don't shame it. A strength in fatigue that emerges when you stop fighting it. What if every low weren't a problem, but simply part of the journey? An inward breath, a needed contrast, an invitation to pause, soften, retreat, nourish yourself. Not every phase is for productivity. Some exist only to remind you, you are not your function. When you allow yourself not to be okay, you open a space for healing, where you can rest without shame, show yourself even when you have nothing to give, breathe without justification. And then, without forcing it, the light returns, not because you demand it, but because you made room. Many have forgotten how to be sad, not because they don't feel it, but because they never learned how to handle it. Sadness is deemed a disturbance to fix, though it's often simply a sign of depth, intelligence, humanity, an indicator that your inner world has been touched by loss, change, or memory. Sadness is not an enemy, but a messenger coming not to destroy, but to show that something mattered, that something is missing, that you feel. And that is a gift, not a flaw. The same holds for fear, doubt, uncertainty. They belong to the emotional spectrum, to life itself. Reject them, and you reject yourself. Condemn them, and you condemn your humanity. Happiness does not mean the absence of difficult feelings, but the refusal to be ruled by them. It means giving them space without letting them take control. It means accepting all that arises, and growing from it rather than despairing. You need not understand everything or resolve all issues. Sometimes it suffices simply to be there with yourself, without solution, without goal, without judgment. Then a dark day becomes not an enemy, but an ally, a moment of return, remembrance, realignment. You learn to hold yourself in heaviness, to stand by yourself in weakness. You become your own safe haven. That is true resilience, not never falling, but being gentle with yourself each time you do. And one day, looking back, you'll see, precisely in the moments you weren't okay, you grew most. Not because you planned it, but because you endured it without denying yourself. The beauty of not being okay lies in the depth it brings, in sincerity, in closeness to yourself. You may be sad, you may doubt, you may grow silent, and you may still be happy, in a quiet, dignified, mature way. Chapter 9. Relationships that nourish, and those that silently destroy you. They say we are the average of the 5 people with whom we spend the most time. It sounds like a line from a motivation workshop, but it holds a truth deeper than you think. Nothing shapes us as profoundly as the relationships we maintain. People are not only companions, they are mirrors, spaces, atmospheres, energies that form our inner world, even unconsciously. Every encounter leaves a mark, some light, like a breeze, others deep, like an impression in clay. It's not always the loudest people who shape us, but often the subtle ones whose presence shifts our mood the moment they enter a room. With some, you may be fully yourself. With others, you begin to lose yourself. There are relationships that let you breathe, in which you stand taller and freer, where your silence is welcome and your truth understood. Relationships that don't seek to improve you, but remind you of who you are. And then there are those that constrict you, that make you doubt your clarity, leave you uneasy in ways you can't name, yet feel each time you return home, emptier, more tired, smaller than before. People who need you but don't truly see you, who take much but give little, who keep you locked in roles you outgrew long ago. The hard truth is these relationships rarely come labeled. They emerge in small gestures, repeated dynamics, unspoken expectations, and often are those nearest to us, family, longtime friends, partners, whom it can feel impossible to leave, even when they drain you inside. Not every relationship is meant for every stage of your life. Some people are bridges. They accompany you for a while, teach you something, help you advance, but they're not forever. Yet from fear of loss, guilt, or habit, we often linger too long where we shrink instead of grow. Happiness requires space, inner room that can be filled not only by your past, but by the present company you keep. If you're constantly entangled in explanations, old conflicts, or subtle demands, little energy remains for creativity, lightness, joy. Your system becomes a scanner. What may I say? What must I avoid? How much of me can safely emerge? Your body senses these signals before your mind does. You feel tired after every meeting, anxious before the next call. You speak less of what moves you, knowing it will find no space. You adapt and call it loyalty when it's often just fear. Fear of rejection, of loneliness, of being difficult. That is not healthy connection. It is emotional constriction, and constriction is the opposite of happiness. It's not about only being with people who perfectly match you, but with those with whom you need not constantly adapt, with those unthreatened by your growth, who grow with you or at least walk alongside you, who neither belittle your joy, exploit your vulnerability, nor repeatedly test your limits. Yes, recognizing this can be uncomfortable. It may mean redefining or even ending some relationships. You may need to explain that you no longer serve old patterns, that you intend to use your time, heart, and energy more consciously, not out of coldness, but out of self-love. Boundaries are not walls, but doors you consciously open or close. Sometimes self-care means gently closing a door, without anger but with clarity. Not because the other is bad, but because you finally choose to be good to yourself. The most important relationship in your life is the one with yourself, and it is influenced by every other. If you are forever explaining, shrinking, defending, or adapting, you lose yourself, not all at once, but gradually, until you no longer recognize your own voice. Thus, it is an act of self-respect to ask, which people give me space? With whom can I sit in silence even when I want to speak? Who allows me to grow? And who constantly reminds me of who I once was? There are people with whom silent companionship suffices, people with whom you can argue without breaking the bond, people who accept your weakness without apology. Such relationships are rare, but possible, and more likely when you cease dwelling where you must battle yourself each day. The price of true happiness is often clarity, and clarity can be uncomfortable, but it frees. It fosters honesty and makes room for genuine intimacy, beyond roles, expectations, and guilt. In the end, You won't count how many friends you had, but how many truly saw you. Not how often you were invited, but how often you felt welcome. Not how many times you said yes, but how often you stayed true to yourself. Choose relationships that let you grow, encourage you rather than exhaust you, protect your inner light rather than dim it. For a happy life begins not only within you, but also with those around you. Chapter 10. The freedom to disappoint others. There is a moment in life, quiet and unassuming, that changes everything. A moment when you stop trying to meet every expectation, when you no longer jump at every call, when you refuse to abandon yourself simply to exist in others' eyes. That is the moment you begin to become free. Freedom is rarely loud. It arrives in a soft, deep breath and a silent resolve. I no longer have to impress you. I no longer have to make you happy. I no longer have to convince you of me. I may disappoint you, if it means not betraying myself. A person who learned to please everyone lives in perpetual compromise. They say yes when they feel no, smile when inside they scream, stay long after they've gone. Not out of malice, but out of fear. Fear of rejection, love's withdrawal, guilt. The fear of losing others often outweighs the pain of losing oneself. Yet each time you override yourself, you leave a mark, perhaps invisible at first, but deeply felt. You become tired, irritable, empty, the version everyone loves, except you. And you begin to believe your worth hinges on never being a burden, on being unfailingly understanding, strong, present. But you are not here to fulfill others' expectations. You are here to be yourself. And sometimes that means disappointing people, not out of spite or selfishness, but from clarity. Because you understand that your inner peace matters more than your image, that you no longer wish to play a part merely to function in someone else's story. Another's disappointment is often the shattering of an image you never chose. People see you not as you are, but as they need you to be. When you start showing yourself, you break that illusion, and it may hurt. Tension, distance, misunderstanding. But it is necessary if you refuse to live in the shadows. Many hold themselves back all their lives to spare others pain. They postpone decisions, avoid conversations, deny desires, and call it consideration. But what they really do is shrink themselves for others' comfort, for external peace built on an internal war. True consideration starts with you, where you acknowledge you are not responsible for others' happiness. You can empathize, support, be there. But you cannot spare anyone the disappointment of your authenticity. Yes, this takes courage. To meet another's gaze when you draw a boundary. To speak a no without apology. To make a choice you know won't be applauded. But that courage grows each time you stay true to yourself, however uncomfortable. It is paradoxical. The more you try to please everyone, the more you lose yourself. The more you try to avoid disappointing others, the more disappointed you become in yourself. One day you'll realize it is not your task to uphold a picture that crushes you. Sometimes love is honest and disappointing at once. Sometimes respect is quiet and firm. And sometimes self-respect is uncomfortable, but healing. When you begin to see yourself as the protagonist of your life, everything changes. You stop apologizing for your needs. Stop making compromises that feel like defeats. Start taking your space, not as aggression, but as the natural expression of your being. A person who lives their truth polarizes, not to provoke, but because authenticity is unusual, because it reminds others of their own inauthenticity. And that's okay. You are not here to be comfortable. You are here to be alive. And being alive means accepting that you won't always be understood, that you won't please everyone, that not everyone will follow your path, but you will walk it, and that is what matters. The freedom to disappoint others is not an invitation to callousness, but to honesty, clarity, a life no longer imprisoned by images that no longer reflect you. You'll discover those who truly love you will stay, even if you disappoint them. Perhaps not immediately, perhaps not without friction, but they will see your authenticity, and that is enough. And those who loved you only when you conformed are not the ones among whom you can grow. Choose your peace, choose your truth, and if you disappoint someone along the way, take a deep breath and keep going. Chapter 11. Living without comparing yourself. It often begins quietly. A glance at what others do, say, show. A number, an image, an achievement, a moment. Suddenly a small doubt grows inside you. Am I enough? Far enough? Good enough? Strong enough? Before you know it, you lose the thread of your own life because you've started viewing it through others' lens. Comparison is a reflex deeply rooted in being human. In moderation, it can motivate, inspire, challenge. But when it becomes a habit, a constant lens through which you see yourself, it turns toxic. It undermines your joy, distorts your perception, belittles what is truly enough. In a world that's always on display, it seems there are only winners and losers. Everyone shares their highlights, successes, shining moments. Hardly anyone shows the quiet in between. The doubts, the setbacks, the ordinary days when nothing special happens, except the fact that you're here, breathing, living, growing. When you compare yourself, you never compare fairly. You take your inner world, with all its questions, insecurities, and processes, and line it up next to someone else's curated exterior. It's like comparing your construction site to their finished house without knowing how many cracks lie beneath its facade. Constant measurement blinds you. It robs you of trust in your own pace, your path, your depth, your voice. You start to adapt, not to your essence, but to an ideal. And the more you do, the more you lose your vitality. There is no universal standard for success, happiness, beauty, or maturity. Every person carries their own rhythm within them, their own story, their own timing. Some bloom early, others later. Some need years of silence before emerging in full force. That is not a deficiency, it is diversity. If you're always comparing, you'll never arrive within yourself. You'll forever orient outward, treating yourself like a project to be optimized rather than a being to be allowed to unfold. And that is exhausting. It makes you tired. It steals your enthusiasm for shaping your own life, because you constantly feel you must reach somewhere else before you may begin. The solution is not a radical withdrawal, but a return to you, your rhythm, your measure, your truth. There is a difference between the will to grow and self-rejection, between the joy of learning and the sense of never being enough. Recognize that difference. It is subtle, but crucial. A person at peace with themselves compares less, not because they are blind to others, but because they are busy with their own path, understanding that depth cannot be measured, that the meaning of their life cannot be reduced to percentages, that it's not about being faster, bigger, better, but about being real. You may walk slowly, you may pause, you may celebrate others without forgetting yourself, you may admire without devaluing yourself, and you may stop measuring because you're not a product, but a human being. When you view your life like a garden, much becomes clear. Some plants grow quickly, others need time. Some bloom immediately, others only after a long rest. Soil, light, care, everything is individual. You would never compare two trees just because one is taller. Why then compare yourself? The deeper you immerse in yourself, the quieter the urge becomes to look left and right. You become more selective about what you consume, whom you surround yourself with, what standards you adopt. This is not withdrawing from the world. It is awakening, breaking free from the collective superficiality toward deeper truth. You are not here to prove you can keep up. You're here to live what wants to come through you. That can only happen when you direct your energy inward. Stop constantly asking where you stand and start feeling who you are. There will always be someone who seems further along. Younger looking, more accomplished, more knowledgeable, more visible. But that tells you nothing about your worth, only about where you're looking. And you can change that direction at any moment. Begin to make yourself the measure, not in the sense of self-optimization, but of self-respect. Don't ask how you can be better than others. Ask how you can be more just to yourself, kinder, more remembering of who you are beyond all comparisons. You are not your position in the race. You are the path itself. And happiness? It doesn't arise from winning. It arises from connection. With you, with what matters to you, with what is true in you, even if it's celebrated nowhere else. You may be slower and still arrive. Chapter 12. Wealth and Happiness, Truth and Illusion. Money is a charged topic. It can unite, divide, uplift, or paralyze. For many, it carries the greatest promise. If I have enough, I'm secure. If I have more, I'm free. And maybe, with some luck, even happy. That's how it's often been told, ingrained deep in our idea of success and quality of life. But money and happiness don't share a simple relationship. They dance around each other, often entwined yet apart. For all the doors money opens, it barely fills inner spaces. It can grant wishes, but cannot take root. It can enable experiences, but not belonging. It can ease burdens, but not heal souls. Most people mistake money for an end goal, as if it were the final station of a long journey. Yet money is merely a means, a tool, neutral yet powerful, because it reflects all we believe about ourselves. If you feel small, even wealth won't convince you otherwise. If you feel empty, possessions will attempt to fill what no object ever can. Happiness doesn't begin with a number. It starts with an attitude, how you view money and relate to it. Yes, money can provide security, comfort, flexibility. But happiness arises not from your balance sheet, but from feeling free to choose, without fear, guilt, or constant comparison. In a performance-driven world, money often becomes the measure of everything. Reward for diligence, intelligence, discipline. If you have much, you must have done something right. If little, you must be at fault. That view is not only false, it's dangerous. It ignores how much of what we own depends on privilege, chance, origin, and poisons the self-worth of those who fight even when they give their all. True freedom with money begins when you stop idealizing it and demonizing it. When you learn to see it for what it is, a means to shape life, no more, no less. Minimalism is often misunderstood. It's not about owning nothing, but about not needing possessions. It's clarity, conscious choices, letting go of what you don't need so space opens for what truly nourishes. Someone content with little is not poorer, but freer, because they don't tie their value to external symbols. They know real abundance comes not from having more, but from being present. Knowing I am enough, even when I don't accumulate, even when I don't keep pace, even when I'm not expanding. Money wields power, but not the power to make you happy. It wields the power to shape life according to your design. The question is not, how much do I have? But, what do I do with it? How consciously do I handle it? How well does my use of money reflect my values? One who earns a lot but lives in constant fear of losing it isn't free. One who has little but lives in harmony with themselves isn't poor. It's not the outside that decides, but your inner approach to resources, priorities, and trust. Many use money as a substitute for recognition, a shield, a way to compensate. But money isn't therapy. It cannot heal inner wounds. It can occupy you, but not touch you. Impress, but not connect. True wealth arises not by having more, but by clarity, knowing what really matters, pausing amid abundance to notice what you already have, practicing gratitude that honors rather than diminishes. And yet you may still seek prosperity. You may enjoy, invest, realize dreams. It's not about asceticism, but balance. Deep awareness that your worth isn't in the price of your clothes, the car you drive, or the place you live, but in how you think, feel, give, and simply are. Money can be a wonderful tool, a gateway to education, health, freedom. But if you devote your whole life to chasing it, you'll grow exhausted, because what you chase rules you. What you fear controls you. What you never deem enough never fulfills you. True abundance means I can receive without clinging. I can give without losing myself. I can let go without panic. I can enjoy without apology. Perhaps your path to a healthy money relationship begins not with an investment, but with a decision to tidy up your beliefs. I don't deserve it. I can't handle money. I'll always have to struggle. These aren't truths but old voices that may now be released. Design your life not around what you think you must have, but around what sustains, strengthens, fulfills you. Sometimes that means fewer things, more depth, less consumption, more meaning, less comparison, more peace. Your happiness doesn't hinge on money, but how you handle it shows how much you trust yourself. Allow freedom and value yourself regardless of figures. In the end, what matters isn't what you own, but how fully you recognize yourself in your life, and how lightly you breathe. Chapter 13. Letting go is not loss but liberation. You were taught to hold on, to people, habits, plans, certainties. Letting go was seldom celebrated, seen as weakness, failure, or surrender. Yet with time you'll learn. What strengthens you is not grasping tighter, but letting go. It's not an ending, but a transition, a return of what no longer belongs to you. Letting go is among the wisest acts a person can undertake. It requires clarity, not hardness, deep feeling, not indifference. For before you can release anything, you must face it. Hold it in your hands, honor it, and ask, has it served me? Does it still support me? Or do I carry it merely from habit, fear, or guilt? There are many kinds of baggage. Thoughts that circle endlessly, visions of how things should have been, relationships long since memories yet still living in your heart because you avoid the pain of goodbye, dreams once bright but now faded, yet still casting shadows over your present. None of it is wrong. Everything you held had its time and purpose, but you are no longer the person you once were. If you wish to grow, you must create space within. You must free your hands to receive the new, and that can't happen if you cling to the old. Letting go is not instantaneous. It's a process that begins when you recognize, quietly admit, what I cling to no longer carries me. It breathes not with me, and I may release it, not out of contempt, but out of understanding. The greatest mistake is thinking that letting go erases meaning. Yet meaning is not ownership. You can honor something and still bid it farewell. You can be grateful and still move on. You can love and still let go. Yes, it will hurt. Not because you lose something, but because you face what you long ignored. The void, the emptiness, the in-between. Only in that space does new life stir. A person who can let go lives more lightly, not because they feel less, but because they no longer cling to what binds them. They don't grow cold. On the contrary, they grow softer, more authentic. They cease rewriting stories already fully told, and in that peace they find freedom. There are places you once called home, yet today feel confined. People you once laughed with, yet now every meeting weighs heavy. Thoughts that once sustained you, now chain you. You may acknowledge this without judgment, guilt, or drama, simply with the inner knowing. I have moved on, and that is okay. Human development travels in cycles. It's natural to change, to develop new values and needs, to sense boundaries where openness once reigned, to drift apart not from spite, but from growth. Mastering letting go does not diminish you. It enlarges your dignity. Releasing what no longer resonates is a profound act of self-respect, a form of inner hygiene, keeping your soul's space clear, and a sign of how much you trust yourself. Knowing that even without that one thing, you are whole, not empty, truly free. Sometimes you'll see what you've released return, transformed, because now it has room to reappear, unforced by your grip. Some things won't return, but you won't be emptier. You'll be truer. A fulfilled life arises not from hoarding people, things, or certainties, but from constant flow, from trusting you need not hold on to everything to be carried, from knowing you need not keep it all to be whole, from accepting you need not explain all to release all. There is a peace that comes only when you stop fighting, when you cease resisting change, when you unclench your fists from the old and simply open your hands. In that openness grows space, and in that space life breathes and happiness returns. Quietly, deeply, truly. You need not let go of everything today, but perhaps begin with the thought you think each day, though it weakens you, the self-image you carry, though you've long moved on, the desire born of duty, not longing. Release it, watch it go, and breathe. For what remains is not what you hold, but what grows with you, and that is enough. Chapter 14. The Art of Making It Simpler. We live in a world more complex than ever. Stimuli, expectations, choices all multiply and speed up. Daily life becomes a balancing act between demands and possibilities, between what we must do and what we truly need. Amid this noise, a quiet truth calls. You don't have to do more. You may make it simpler. Simplicity does not mean less value, naivete, or shallowness. It means clarity, calm, authenticity. Living simply is a commitment to the essential, what sustains, not what distracts, what remains when everything else shouts. Many chase the feeling of truly mastering life with systems, to-do lists, routines, success formulas. They optimize, organize, structure, and still sense something missing. Peace, depth, arrival. Because life cannot be controlled like a calendar. It can only be shaped, and sometimes the beauty begins with omission. Choosing simplicity is radical in a culture that glorifies abundance. It's a quiet resistance to more is more, an act of inner sovereignty demanding clarity about what truly belongs to you and what you've inherited unexamined. What do you really need? Not as an ideal or concept, but in everyday life, in your body, in your heartbeat. Perhaps less stuff, fewer contacts, fewer tasks. Perhaps a rhythm based on feeling, not performance. Perhaps a home that supports rather than sparkles. Perhaps a daily flow where you breathe, not just at night, but in every moment. Simplifying doesn't mean withdrawing from the world, but choosing consciously. Owning responsibility for your energy, not needing to know everything, to have an opinion on everything, to follow every impulse. Saying no, not out of defense, but love for yourself. True power often lies in reduction, not deprivation, but clarity. When you no longer need 10 options to feel safe, but only one that resonates. When you no longer need 100 contacts, but a few honest relationships. When you no longer juggle everything at once, but do one thing at a time, mindfully, calmly, fully present. This life isn't spectacular. It lacks glossy allure. but it has sustaining depth. It grants inner and outer space, and in that space something wondrous occurs. You hear yourself again, feel what truly nourishes you, lead your life from within rather than manage it from without. Choosing simplicity is not a step backward, but a return to what counts, to what endures once all else falls away. The greatest art is distinguishing urgent from essential. Urgent shouts, essential whispers. If you constantly react to the urgent, you lose touch with the essential. Sometimes you need courage to step out, to stop playing the hectic game, to slow down when all race, to be silent when everything speaks, to own less but live more. Simplicity is not scarcity. It is an abundance of clarity. It grants freedom of choice, deeper sleep, more attentive living, richer love. It doesn't reduce possibilities. It reveals which truly belong to you. Then you notice how liberating it is to let go of obligations that drain you, routines you never chose, roles that no longer fit, goals you never really wanted. You free yourself from the knot of external demands, and what remains is a self that can breathe. Living simply does not mean life is always easy, but it means you no longer lose yourself in the complexity of the unimportant. It means treating your energy like a precious resource, choosing your actions and, above all, your reasons for them. Perhaps you decide to plan less and trust more, own less and share more, speak less and listen more. Perhaps you discover the power of small steps, recurring rituals, the silence between appointments. Perhaps you see that happiness often hides where you didn't look, within simplicity. A person who simplifies life doesn't become poorer, but deeper, carries less, but more consciously, accomplishes not less, but more truly, lives not faster, but more present. In the end, it's not how much you did or how full your calendar was, but whether you were with yourself, present, felt, loved, heard. That is not achieved by more, but by the right less. The art of making it simpler is a choice, not retreat from the world, but a conscious return to what matters, and in that lies the truest freedom. Chapter 15. You are already here. Now you may stay. There is no place you must reach to be happy, no line you must cross to be worthy, no final goal that will complete you. For what you seek is not outside you. It was never there. It lives within every moment you cease overtaking yourself, in every unguarded breath, in every touch you feel without judging. Much of your life was an attempt to become better, stronger, more successful, more mature. Along the way, you often forgot. You simply are. Not later, not once everything aligns, but now, here. Imperfect, but real, tired yet awake, doubting yet upright. That is enough. What if you stopped fighting, not out of resignation but trust? What if you stopped seeing yourself as a project and began seeing yourself as home? What if you ceased constantly reinventing yourself and started remembering? Remembering what you already know. You are valuable even when you accomplish nothing, lovable even when you give nothing, enough even when you simply breathe. Happiness isn't a result. It's a state that begins when you stop abandoning yourself. Your path back to you was never straight. You stumbled, doubted, took detours, clung to what weakened you, and let go more than you wished. Yet here you stand, wiser, softer, truer. Not because you're free of wounds, but because you've learned to live with them without losing yourself. You haven't become someone else. You've drawn nearer to yourself. And that is growth. Not departing from the old, but remembering the authentic. Not disguising, but shedding layers. Not chasing glitter, but returning to silence. Perhaps in years to come you'll look back and realize it wasn't a great success that changed you most, but the moment you stopped justifying yourself, took a deep breath without guilt, and ceased questioning your worth. The freedom you seek does not begin without but within, where you stop manipulating yourself, stop adapting to be loved, stop performing to be seen, and simply are, and stay. And in that staying lies everything: depth, calm, clarity, and yes, happiness. Not fireworks, but an inner glow. Not a rush, but a steady heartbeat. Not a promise, but presence. It may never be perfect. You may never be fully done. But perhaps that isn't the point. Perhaps it's about being with yourself, in becoming, in change, in the now. And precisely there, in that lived connection with yourself, arises what you've sought all these years: peace. You may stay, here, within you, with you, and all you need will come to you, not by striving, but by no longer losing yourself. Happiness dwells within you. Not tomorrow, not someday, but now. And you are already here. Stay. Thank you for walking this path with me, listening, opening, perhaps feeling silent, reflecting. Perhaps you recognized yourself in places, or discovered something unspoken until now. And maybe, just maybe, this audio journey has quietly sparked a decision within you, to be true to yourself. Happiness isn't a state to attain. It's a daily opening, an attitude, a choice. If you've listened this far, you know. You need no permission to be happy, only the courage to allow it. If this audiobook has touched, inspired, or accompanied you, please share your thoughts below in the comments. What moved you? What did you let go? What did you see anew? Your words can help others find recognition, healing, growth. I read every single comment with an open heart, and thank you for being here. Stay with yourself, stay honest, and above all, stay alive. You deserve it.